Welcome back, everyone. Greg Essenmacher here, but you know who I am. But you want to hear who my guest is today, and it's none other than Dr. Matthew Norton. I am so excited for you to meet him. He's an expert in human behavior and emotions. Matthew Norton has spent decades guiding people toward fulfilling their purpose and achieving greater success. He's designed assessments that improve understanding oneself, communication, and team dynamics. And boy, don't we need more of that today. These tools have led to breakthroughs for businesses and their leaders. Through his certification program, he trains coaches to facilitate similar transformations. Matthew and his wife Judy reside in La Mesa, enjoying life with their interesting blended family. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm big on words, so I'm going to start right there. Your interesting blended family? Let's start right there. We're going right after the jugular, buddy.
Okay, all right. Let's do it. Yeah. Well, do you want? We can keep it as simple as that direct answer, or I can also, if you're going to ask me, maybe even why I do what I do as part of this, I could blend those together, and it might not be a spoiler, and it might add more nuance. So
I mean, you put in your bio, interesting, blended family. I'm just reading the words and it struck me as interesting. So, interesting. Yeah. So they were saying the word again. I think my listening audience, when they heard that, at least a good percentage of them are probably thinking, so he thinks that they're interesting. Tell me more.
Tell me more. Okay. Well, okay. So I'll go right to there then. So when I married the first time, I married a woman that had twin daughters. And so they were 3 years old when we got married. We were married for 2.5 years at the point that I officially adopted them. And then within a matter of weeks, she had a heart attack and died. And so here I was 30 years old with twin 5-year-olds. And the reason I had them was gone and left to kind of figure out how I'm going to move forward from here. Needless to say, that was devastating to me. It was difficult to find my way forward for a bit, understandably, I think. When I never looked for another wife. I always kind of feel like my second and current wife just found me, appeared in my life, which has been a wonderful thing. I've now been married. The better side of the story in terms of people feeling a little more uplifted is that I've now been married 36 years to an amazing woman. I feel very grateful that I had another chance. That doesn't always happen to people who are happily married and lose a spouse. But when we got married, we blended 3 same-age daughters. So because she had a daughter 1 month younger than the other 2. So here we were, 3 6-year-olds, none of whom are mine biologically, right? And so the greatest, enjoyment that I had during some of that time would be out shopping at the mall or something. And people would say, "Oh, how old are your girls?" And I would say, 12. And then
with a blank stare on your face, and they're like, "Wait, there's 3 of them."
So I would count, and then they'd say, "Triplets?" And then I could go wherever I wanted to from there.
I mean, that's a conversation starter and or stopper. I so appreciate you sharing that and being so vulnerable right out of the gate on the Two Sleuth podcast. It is a theme that runs throughout all 80 plus episodes now that we've had this show. And the reason why is that for those girls of yours, those twins, I believe everything happens for a reason, and everybody can have their own belief system, call it cosmic universe, universal spirit, call it God, call it, Allah, call it whatever you want. Everything happening for a reason. The blessing that those girls had to have found you, right? That you found your first wife, and then what happened? For them to then be attached to you and be a part of your life. What an amazing gift. and for you to be able to give of yourself to be able to raise them, right, and commit your life to them. And then the blessing of, I wasn't looking, but she came along and she happened to have a daughter of the same age. I mean, that, I don't think they're, I mean, I don't want to make it comparative, but what a huge blessing and gift to be able to give of self and that kind of love to other human beings. And I commend you for that. And I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, because it is so personal, but there are so many messages like that out there. So for myself, my mother passed when I was 4 years old, and my dad remarried when I was 8. And I was too young to really understand the implications of, but I know there was, I'm the youngest of 6 kids as well. And so there was tremendous conversation about whether or not my stepmother would adopt us. And I didn't know what the, I mean, there's legal ramifications and there's a whole bunch of implications to it. So you sharing that brought back some of those memories of, well, of when I was a kid and what some of that was, and just the love of another human being to step into a role like that, to parent, and to be able to give of self like that. I love it. Did that have an influence, do you believe, on the work that you're doing today, on working with helping others to really find their own breakthroughs as leaders, as giving of themselves, and the emotional growth and intelligence that it takes to be a good leader?
Yeah, I just to add, just to finish that story, 2 years later, then we had a son of our own, which added some different nuances to this complex blended family. That's actually why we're in. You said La Mesa, we're in San Diego, outskirts of San Diego, and that's why we're here, is because my son and daughter-in-law live here. And yes, my company is called People Plus Purpose on Purpose. And really, because if we go all the way back to the beginning, in my broken family, I didn't really feel like I had either. And so my life was a journey, really looking to both find, what am I doing here? What's my part? How do I fit? I always sensed there was a purpose to it. I just couldn't grab a hold of it. And nobody around me was helping. In fact, weren't that many people around me. It was kind of like my dad left when I was 2 and was not a part of my life, and my mom was too emotionally extended, shall we say, to be able to really be there. So, and there were no other relatives, and so it was just kind of me figuring out my life. When I did marry, when I graduated, now I'm a doctor, and then soon after got married, and now I've got 2 kids. And then when the center of that fell apart, then I remember going through the stages of grieving, of the denial that such a thing had happened, with the bargaining with God that to somehow turn it around, unrealistic things rationally, but that's to the anger that it wasn't changing. And I distinctly remember the day, and this is the most direct answer to your question. I distinctly remember the day the girls were gone, and I was laying on the floor in one of their rooms. I was just kind of crying out to God, and ultimately kind of opened my hands at that place of surrender, which is that 4th stage of grieving, right? To be able to say, if you could just make my life feel like it's worth living again, that I'll dedicate the rest of my life to helping other people get set free so that they can find and live their best life. And so from that point, 37 years ago now, that's why I do what I do. It's also so the purpose piece, the people aspect of business, that's so much more my interest, and the ability to navigate emotions, the stress and emotions, which is what I spend more of my time coaching and training on than anything else. So,
And there's such a tremendous need for that. I can tell you, with GNA Consult, we work a lot on the coaching and training in Full Arch and the metrics and driving the numbers so it's more profitable. And inevitably, with many of our clients that have a GP side of their practice and then add the Full Arch side of their practice, the Full Arch side is a whole different beast and animal, and it lends itself to some ego, and those that are very successful on the GP side of the practice. So all of these pieces, right, that we work on from our side, and we see such a tremendous need for the human development side, right? The leadership development side, because for a number of our clients, they're tremendously successful with smaller teams or the controlled teams of what they know for a long period of time. And then they see that shining glimmer on the hill of the 20, 30, 50, $60,000 treatment and believe I can apply the same principles, right? But don't understand some of the complexities of what it takes for a team and having a whole team around and that emotional transformation and how it is more about the why, the emotion behind the yes with patients than it is the product that they're delivering, which they're so familiar with. And so what you're talking about is so relevant for a lot of our clients that we work with and deal with on a regular basis. And I mean, I can just share on my personal journey too, that, growing up and my father was, chose to bury himself in the bottle. That's how he dealt with my mother's death. And then myself also doing the same thing until 33. And as I start to find my passion, and there's people in the industry, Laura Brenner is one that comes to mind that helps people to find their passion. It sounds like you're doing the same thing, just these moments in life that inspire us to help others to find their
Yes.
best way and whatever path that we find.
Yep.
Am I
Yep.
landing
Yep.
on that right?
Sometimes people say, "Oh,
Yeah.
it's like you're like a therapist or you're, for business." And I say, "Yeah, I mean, I'm a relationship person, and I especially love working with leaders, and I'll go as deep as they're willing to go." And I have clients where it doesn't get very deep because they're not ready for that, and it's not. But there, over time, when I'm working with people, things, even the people who are reluctant to go there, begin to realize that there's things that are blocking them that are not at that surface level. There's something else that's getting in the way that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and all of my regular listeners on the Two Sleuth podcast, this will resonate and sound very familiar with previous guests just over the last 5 or 10 episodes in different forms and functions, from clinicians who really have taken to and understand the need for the self-reflection and the identification of how to be a better leader and how they've had success with, to those who actually work in the field, which I think is critically important. So walk with me a little bit, because I have seen a couple of your assessments, the way that you approach this with potential clients, with clinicians, with teams, and what your process looks like. So for those that are listening out there who it might start to resonate with them a little bit, draw a picture a little bit of what that process might look like for them.
The first thing is really to know both who you are and what you value. I mean, we want to know where we're going, but even more, where are you now, then, and who are you? And so, in fact, we talked about Shar Watson as, in having her in common, which is how we met. But she and I did a webinar together several years ago that was called Visionary Leader: Peak Success Begins with You, the First Hire. So when people reach out to me looking for some help, thinking somebody referred them often, or they heard something that maybe I could help them, it's often about a team member, since they go, "Oh, he's a relationship guy, so he can maybe fix this." And so it's a team member that needs to be fixed, often an office manager, that if I could just make that problem go away, then all would be well with the world. Until, as we're having a conversation, we find out there were 6 or 7 other office managers over the last years that didn't work out either. So sometimes there'll be a dawning moment where they go, "You think some of this could have been because of me?" And I always know we've made progress at that point. So it's, who is this leader? Who is this business owner? Who's the leadership team, depending on how big the organization is. So that's a great place to start, to know yourself, to know the people closest to you. What are your strengths? What are your driving values? So in helping people know themselves and then know their existing team to intentionally build their team, I use assessments. I've been working with assessments for 27 years now, went through all the certification for that. I was given an opportunity about 7 years ago to create assessments of my own. Never thought I would do that. Never would have probably made the time for that, or thought, oh, can I pull this off? Can I get the help that I need to do it? Um, so, but it was for an app. This app did not get all the funding. They paid me to develop the assessments, which was kind of cool. I was going to keep them. It was going to be white labeled. They did not get all the funding they needed. They went away. So the thing never happened. But it was back to all things happening for a purpose. It was a game changer for me to not only take my knowledge of assessments, but to infuse them my own life experience, my own doing of the research to be able to create the ones I have now. So I created 9. I have 4 that I call my core 4. Those are looking at the behavioral dimension, the cognitive dimension, the inspirational dimension, and the emotional dimension. So if I can have those core 4, I can help people see and understand themselves and the other people around them more with greater clarity, to hire with greater intentionality for role, but also team fit. And it helps me then guide and customize the coaching on how to improve communication. How do we collaborate more effectively? How do we resolve conflict? All of these things. And my favorite is the emotional agility piece and how that ties back to the stress challenges that we're facing.
And when working with clients over the years with these assessments and then working with them to help them to make these breakthroughs, right? To live their best lives and to be their best leaders in practice and working with teams in developments, what have you found to be some of the most surprising learnings along the way for yourself and for the teams that you work with and the individuals you work with?
Probably when I think about it, it's probably not that surprising, but when I find healthcare professionals, small business healthcare professionals, especially, I have more experience in that realm than I do. And I don't coach exclusively there, but have more experience there, especially in the world of dental. And I guess it was a surprise to see on the emotional agility piece how nearly across the board low emotional agility scores are for these people who are incredibly intellectually smart, who are incredibly technically skilled, but never put the attention there, never thought it was a thing. And nobody ever developed that in them. These other parts were developed to the exclusion of those larger emotional elements. And it creates leadership challenges because a lot of times the team members have greater emotional agility than the doctors do.
And how does that show up when you start to work with clients that you see this in action?
Usually there's some sort of team drama. There's turnover that's too high. There's a lot of frustration, anxiety, overwhelm, maybe even anger that's coming up. I think a lot of times the business owners are feeling a little like they're losing motivation, kind of a loss of sense of the dreams that they were aiming for, more of a sense of futility in getting there. Wishing it didn't require all these people to be able to accomplish it. I think, and it ultimately, I love to tie these things into loss of production and profitability. There's a lot of great research, and certainly my experience points to that, although it's not a straight line connection in most people's minds that the levels of stress or the challenges with emotional agility would have a financial result, but it very much does.
Well, and I think for the work that you do, I would think that if there were a straight line from A to B, it would be a little bit easier for the work that you do. Your behavior over here in column A results in lost productivity in column B, which results in column C, which is your loss in profitability. But at least in all of my clients and the ones that I work with, there isn't a straight line directive. But just as you're speaking, that's why I asked the question. I wanted to be able to flesh out so listening audience could identify with how do you see it show up in their practice, right? Lack of motivation, overwhelm, drama, right? Not there's every drama, right? Turnover, things of this nature. And I would add to an excess or above and beyond what industry standards or norms are, just because all of those things can be present, but to a normal level. But then again, just as I say that and I say it out loud with you, Matthew, I think to myself, wait a second, like they wouldn't know what an industry standard is unless they have a barometer. And if it's, birds of a feather flock together, if they're hanging out with individuals who have the same level of emotional agility, then they really wouldn't know what an industry standard is anyway. So I hesitate to even say that. So I would encourage them to go online and take one of the assessments if they're brave enough to really get an assessment and say, well, this will really tell you. If they have some hints at maybe perhaps we need to fill in the blank, right? Take a look at what's going on. So I can appreciate that. Thank you for.
And even just the topic of stress, in terms of, how big of a deal is stress overall? Because I think the tendency is to kind of go, stress, it's kind of namby-pamby. It's kind of like, well, buck up and get on with it. You just got to do what you got to do and it'll go away, whatever it is. It's a temporary phenomenon. So it's not really a thing for most people. So to shed light on that, and because it's such a key piece of what I'm trying to help solve for people, I got a few statistics if I can just share. I've got 4 stats because I think this is mind-blowing. I wouldn't have guessed this, but this is a big deal. 75% of small business owners are concerned about their mental health, while 56% have been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, or a stress-related condition. 83% of Americans experience work-related stress, which means if you look around your office, that's, most of them. U.S. businesses lose up to $300 billion yearly as a direct result of workplace stress that causes a staggering 120,000 deaths and results in nearly $190 billion in healthcare costs each year.
I mean, those stats are really, they're mind blowing. And I thought of the phrase when you were sharing earlier, the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps is so 80s and 90s. People get over it. That is not where we live in 2024. So could we just set that aside, please? And let's really take a look and reflect, especially in the field of dentistry. I mean, it is an industry that, when you're top 5, it's good if you're trying to win awards or you're talking about your bank account. But when you're in top 5 of industries of number of suicides, that's not something to be proud of. Let's take a look at ourselves and look at each other and look out for each other. And let's really take a look at what's going on and really do a self-assessment there. So thank you for bringing those stats forward, because I'm a big metrics-driven guy. So those are helpful for sure. Well, okay, Matthew, this is where I'm going to shift gears a little bit. All of my guests play a little something on the Two Sleuth called What the Sleuth is Going On? It's three rapid-fire questions. First thing that comes to mind. Are you ready to play?
Sure. Bring it on.
Right. Question. Oh, I like it. I got challenged back to bring it on. All right. I don't know that anybody said that before. Ooh, this is going to get good. All right. Question number 1. What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
Is this of my own or somebody else's? The worst bad breath. I had a patient years back that had some sort of significant issue going on inside, and every time I would see her, and she was kind of a friend too, and so give a hug, and it was like, oh, and so yeah, that was rough.
I like that you qualified it with kind of a friend. Did everybody pick up on that? I picked up on that. Kind of a friend, right? So you have an interesting blended family, and she's kind of a friend. Don't name her. You can tag her in socials when I post, but don't. I'm not going to make you say her name.
I'm glad you're collecting these moments, Greg, and repeating them back.
And putting in my little memories jar. Oh, all right. Question number 2. If you could change one thing about your smile, what would it be?
I would if I could go back in time to do it, I would have sought greater wisdom from dental professionals to help me not have to go through as many extractions that then led to a lot of complexity. So I often have not felt great about my smile, which kind of feeds into a lot of the smile design and full arch messaging and all of that. It's a tough rebuild after you've had a lack of wisdom on dental recommendations, and I feel like my life has been replete with bad dental recommendations.
Yeah, it's definitely an area that we see a lot in the full arch space that that G&A Consult is all about, right? So it's challenging suggestions along the way is definitely one of the avatars that we work with. Those who haven't seen a dentist in forever and ever, but as a result of what you've just described as well, right? Bad experiences early on, unfortunately, as part of that as well for some. So thank you for sharing that. Question number 3. If you could go back, see, I'd like you were reading my questions ahead of time. Nobody gets the questions ahead of time, just so all the listeners know. Nobody gets the questions ahead of time. Although if they listen to previous ones, they actually hear them because they're the same. Anyway, and question number 3. If you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product and no, you can't choose your own, which one would you choose and why?
I would have loved to have found earlier on toothpaste that was actually healthy and that if I swallowed it, I wouldn't have to call the hazmat team.
There's so much out there right now going on, and we actually have a client. We have 2 clients actually that have their own natural toothpaste that you can actually eat, and it's not toxic to your body. So there you have it.
I know at least one of them.
Yeah. You do know one of them, right? So yeah, there's a little bit of crossover, and I know both of them actually listen to the Tooth Sleuth podcast. So, but what we shall not name products unless they're willing to sponsor the show. So when they're willing to sponsor an episode, they'll get their name called out. So hint, hint, wink, wink, nod, nod. So thank you for that. Well, Matthew, in the last few minutes, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with my listening audience today?
I think the importance of emotions, we alluded to that, of all of the assessments. And I mean, a good place to start, because emotions are so key on the practice-wide level, I've got a free 3-minute business emotional health scorecard. I have another one called the People Performance Scorecard that I know that you did. Takes a few more minutes, but they're both free. But this one specifically that speaks to the business emotional health, that then ideally could lead into the owner and the team taking the emotional agility assessment. That's a paid proposition, but not expensive. The insights, everybody gets an 18-page report that goes with that then can lead into knowing where you need to improve across 5 different dimensions of emotional agility that I believe will change your personal world and also completely change the business, because it's people that drive performance, but it's emotions that drive people. Research confirms that. My experience of that is true no matter how rational we believe we are making decisions and behaving based upon rationality. That's not really the case. And so the more we can improve the emotions, it's going to lead to better communication, better relationships, better collaboration, better ability to avoid or resolve conflict. It's a game changer. And the research is massive as to improving emotions ultimately culminating in greater profitability. So, I mean, that to me, it's the solution to stress for the most part is improving emotional skills, and it leads to changing the entire culture.
And with all the investment that clinicians make into technology, equipment, and all of the investment in marketing and bringing new patients in the door and other types of training, to be able to do some self assessment, at least to see where they're at as leaders for team development and the emotional agility, I think it's critically important to make even just a small investment in that, relatively speaking to the others that I mentioned in areas that they make investments in their practice. I mean, it pays off in droves and the multiples tremendous. And where do they find all that information, Matthew, when they want to be able to access that?
They can go to peoplepluspurpose.com. There's some upgrades in the making to the web page, so they're not going to find the free assessments there. So maybe we can put that in the show notes. Would be great. They can do those, and then the core four are there as well as the work that I do.
Absolutely. And on all the platforms, doesn't matter where you're listening to the Tooth Sleuth podcast, we'll make sure that's in the show notes so you can connect through that way. My guest today has been Dr. Matthew Norton. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Tooth Sleuth podcast. It has been tremendously informative, and I'm so pleased that you joined me today. Thank you so much.